Laura. She stood 5'3" with webbed feet from birth and matching birthmarks on both of her thighs. One was shaped like her father, the other her mother, or so she would say. To me, they looked like black splashes roughly the same, the left slightly larger, more jagged than the other, them both mottled by patches of dark brown. A single hair came out long from the softer one. She showed them to me 3 weeks after we met on a wet park bench at 3 a.m. Her webbed feet came first, but they didn't concern her much. Said she didn't see the fuss. Not since high school, she said. Her curves and short stature made her a terrible swimmer, and the other girls had made a sport of pointing out the irony, among other meaner things. And my Laura was ironical in many ways more than that. The mark of her father was the more painful. Tears welled in her eyes as she traced the contours of the sharpest edge and explained the meaning of its strange geometry. But it was hard to follow after the part with the wooden cane. Her speech lapsed fast, and every third or fourth word sounded something like Arabic. And it was Arabic, it turned out. Stunning language Arabic is. Even directions to the restroom sound poetic in Arabic. To me they did, at least. She wrote to me on a napkin once. Ahibuni kama la, ana la yastidi wala. I never asked what it meant, don't ask me why, and translating her words now, after what happened, after what she did, is the furthest thing from anything I can ever see myself doing by choice. Same thing happened with the mark on her mother's side, but it was Italian that she drifted to then. I was too mesmerized to say anything, just followed her expressions and inflections as best as I could. A different kind of pain came when her language shifted that time, hitting hardest, from what I could tell, over the patch where that long hair grew from. Near impossible not to embrace her when she winced. And then the hair itself brought a smile, just long enough to show how complex that relationship was. On the other side of the napkin, which I still have somewhere actually, she wrote, Manon nel modo in cui ha fatto lei. I'd never met a girl with natural metaphors on her legs before. Not that she saw things that way, of course. It couldn't have endeared her more, and her trauma made my insides rise a fire up. I don't think it much mattered that I didn't follow everything. It was all about her. I was her safety, more like, which was how it had been since the beginning. Since the night I'd been walking home late and found her holding unsteady to the other side of the barrier. The one on the high bridge over the river. She was too fucked on DXM to remember it the next day. Where she'd been, how she'd gripped my back and cried into my neck as I carried her. All she had were the photos. Some public bathroom mirror. It looked like bright red lipstick and a brighter red jacket, and her smile this demented blend of dissociation and euphoria. Like she was ready for her own party. And then the video of her walking to that party. Holding the front camera towards her as she danced and rambled and sang fuck knows what while flashes of midnight traffic passed her by. I slept on the couch and called a cab before I woke her. Surprisingly, she wasn't that surprised. She smiled at me actually, then kept smiling. And then she asked what was for breakfast. Her lipstick smeared Joker-like to one side and she smelt like an admixture of 3 perfumes and green grapes. Reflexively, I said, poached eggs and avocado. Her smile widened as she replied, can you do scrambled? Reckon I can manage that. Completely forgot about the cab and pretended I wasn't home when the doorbell rang, which she found hilarious. Scaredy cat, she called me. Not a scaredy cat. You're a distraction is all. And she smiled her biggest smile yet. She stayed all day and we ordered pizza for an early dinner. I didn't know how to ask her tactfully, but I tried my best. Just after the movie finished and I was putting the boxes in the bin. Didn't want to make a big deal just in case. So what were you doing on the bridge last night? And she winced and looked away. It was raining outside. Heavy rain, and there was no traffic on the street. And then she was hugging me where I stood. And my big arms were around her firm as she squeezed. She couldn't remember the bridge, but she must have remembered the before. Too much shame in her eyes for otherwise. I pieced the DXM later on, after finding out about her issue with substances, the pharmaceuticals which were the ones she was able to order safely online. We didn't speak of it again until just after 3 a.m. on a wet park bench 3 weeks later. That's when I saw the photos and the video, and that's the first time that my heart broke while sitting beside the same person that it felt for. A month after that, she moved in. So too her makeup and fashion collection, which took up half the fucking apartment, I swear. Good thing I'd gotten an Aurelius hard on the previous summer and thrown most of my excess away. So there was just enough space. I didn't mind, not really. Rooms had a way of expanding when we were close. And my small two-bedroom had turned into a palace. She quit the drugs and accepted the diagnosis she'd been resisting and began a strict regime of exercise, reading, and medication. For pills of a morning, one at night, a PRN for when things went haywire, which had been happening frequently and had been the look on her face in the bathroom mirror before she danced to the river that night. She was, by every measure I could discern, saved. I had saved the life of a person, and how she loved me, and with what intensity she loved, from themselves, helped her find the self that she'd been but forgotten, and there on my chest each morning her waking smile was the heart-stop of my paralysis. And in the twilights of the night, when I woke from a dream to another dream of her there with half that beautiful smile on her face as she slept, I barely noticed the hair go in. Nor did I notice the sound that it made lower down under the sheets, quiet beneath the edge of my awareness. That horrid suctioning of some nightmarish leech. All I could feel was the warm soft of her skin. And she made sure, even when she was gone those nights, that some part of herself was against me. Our bodies always touching, somehow. And then, more than a year later, after her medication had stopped again, and the manias began again, and I found a receipt for the DPH in the bin, I finally looked in the mirror. Really looked, it's kind of funny, the things you don't notice in routine glances, when grooming, making sure your hair doesn't look like shit, taking that brief acknowledgement of self in your reflection each morning. Or the changes in your energy reserve each day. That 6 months prior you were someone else. All too easy to blame it on smoking weed again, and quitting before starting again. On your old depression returned. When I looked in the mirror that day, that's when everything changed. I still don't know how she did it. How those purple veins that vectored hideous from that pus-filled hole on my thigh had all been invisible. Or how it was gone when I tried to show her after confronting her about her medication and the DPH. She pretended not to hear. Screamed that the meds held her back and changed her for the worst, and the manias were part of her and weren't manias at all. That she was gaining weight because of the olanzapine had nothing to do with not exercising anymore. That I'd forced the diagnosis on her that had been ruining the person that she was, the one who danced and felt free. The reflection in the mirror, it wasn't me at all. My jaw had sunken in Gaunt-like beneath dark recesses beneath eyes turned flat, tired, and half dead. 20 kilograms on the scales gone. My muscular frame then withered, practically cadaverous. And on the mornings after those confrontations, she'd smile. That fucking smile. Like Futurama's Hypnotoad, it was beams of unparalleled love that gazed and seemingly filled everything that I had lost. An impossible love to fake, yet too intense to be entirely real. Just as impossible in that state to resist. And looking in the mirror, still hypnotized in her smile's afterglow, once again, I looked perfectly fine. But something in my perception had changed. I wasn't sleeping the same. I was barely sleeping at all. Not without THC and nicotine, which we mix together where I'm from. A compound addiction that I'd struggled with in the past, that served the denial better than well. The weed would wear off at precisely 3 a.m. each night. Just in time, long after it had begun, to feel the first itch of the hair going in. That wasn't a hair at all. And on hot summer evenings well over a year after the bridge, the bedsheets would slip away and our bodies became a smooth pale gray in the half-light. Illuminated such that finally one night I was able to see. The pain was the thinnest of needles at first, like the proboscis of some oversized mosquito. But it didn't last long. Other senses flooded in and overlapped and replaced themselves. The second was the noise, a rhythmic kind of squelching, rubbery and wet and hideously alive. A sign of something dreadful happening, down there. That alone was terrifying enough. But it wasn't the worst of it. Not even close. The third sense, looking down at my exposed thigh, is what I saw. Laura's right side birthmark had moved. Her feet were crossed between my calves and her softer black splash. The one that she called her mother was gone. It was on me, twice the size it had been, and the underside of its surface, facing upwards, shined like a varnished leather in the dim. And there was motion, and it was heaving. Its edges were affixed to my skin, and its interior was rising and expanding bubble-like before it drooped and flattened down, then back up, paused a moment, and went back down again. That's when the hypnosis came to an end. I didn't move, couldn't even if I was able. All three senses rapidly collided, and I wanted to scream, but couldn't do that either, and I stared hopeless and helpless as this black mark, this thing, steadily vacuumed some substance from out deep within, from within me, and then it stopped, and it must have realized that I was watching, and it flattened itself again, and remained still, and then my ears began to ring loud as my sight became dotted and increasingly dense with these dots that caved a thickening border inwards, until finally, quickly, that ghastly image and the room were gone. And when I woke, gone was everything. The bedding beside me was well made, the pillow untouched. The racks of clothes that had long suffocated my bedroom were gone. Laura was nowhere to be seen. It was only the pus-filled hole in my thigh, now wide as a jar lid, that remained, throbbing drainingly and painfully as I got out of bed and limped to the kitchen and rested my body achingly on the bench, head down, eyes looking up, scanning hopeless, looking over what had once been the palace that we made. Laura was nowhere to be seen. Not the smallest trace that she'd ever been there. Just the minimalism of the stoicism that I'd forgotten. Several books neat on a shelf, the old second-hand couch before the sparse wooden coffee table, a sole plant in the corner unwatered and half dead. Everything still and quiet, so quiet you could almost hear a static in the air. Laura, had she ever been there? Only the memory remained, and from inside it suddenly bloomed, like an antibody to the pain, filtering out over the stark of the reality that was before me. And the room filled with colors vibrant with life unseen, and it was Ghost BC from the stereo. Quick footsteps on the floorboards and laughter that was louder than the music, before finally, inexplicably, she was there. And it was the two of us. Me full-bodied, the both of us healthy-skinned, and I was picking her up and spinning her around and around as she laughed and giggled carefree and blissful. And when we toppled to the couch, I glided into them as myself and felt the soft press of her body underneath. And it was the gaze of her smiling eyes staring into mine as I leant my head down slow, our lips interlocking rhythmic, that old crescendo of love transfigured through skin, a kiss that consumed all else. Then gone went that world, and it was only her, wrapped a bundle in the sheets, looking at me, smiling, always smiling. And when I woke that night, I looked back, how I do not know, with a smile of my own, one of love and forgiveness somehow. But it was a forgiveness for no one, for someone who I thought that I knew, the beautiful girl I thought had been saved, who couldn't be saved because she had killed herself a long, long time ago. Tears in my eyes and that pain in my leg all of a sudden. I yawned with fatigue and checked my phone. It was 3 a.m. Heavier than ever, I raised my head. Moonlight fell aslant through the window and spread angular to the other side of the bed. A scene that looked almost liminal. Gray light between a half-dark across nothing to something empty. But I couldn't have been alone. Somehow, by some force, she must have known. Suddenly, my reverie broke as the room lit up. It was light from my phone. It was a message from Laura. A loud flash of ringing in my ears, and it was a falling weight in the air. But I felt no surprise or fear. The only surprise was that, in spite the surrealism of the nightmare I found myself in, I felt nothing. The day had been a blur, was still a blur. The dots came to, for a moment, and still I felt nothing. I grabbed the phone. It was numbness, maybe. Sterile numbness. It took 3 attempts for the passcode to work. I opened WhatsApp, and our old chat, the one that once told the story of everything when apart, was empty. Only this one new message, which was a video. I hit play. The screen was blank at first. Then a flash of distortion over white, and it was my bathroom from the perspective of the lounge room. And it was me, standing next to the bathroom doorway, wide-eyed and unblinking and impossibly still, staring directly at the camera. Some other me who looked exactly like me, but surely can't have been, and surely would never be, he or it, then turned drone-like with a wooden stiffness, its widened eyes still locked, and it grabbed a rope hanging high from a cluster of nails over the door. I couldn't absorb the image properly, So unbelievably fucking insane it was. But neither could I stop watching. The knot of the noose was already done, and it was gripping it, gesturing it at the camera. Its blank expression cracked awful into the ghastliest of smiles, and slow it stepped onto the chair I then saw and took the ring and brought it up and over and down around its neck. And then there was Laura. Some other Laura. This fully naked Laura, covered head to toe with black splashes that writhed and bubbled and glistened with alien wet. I barely registered her voice. It wasn't until the video stopped that I knew what she had said. I guess that's how the mind works sometimes, when it's numb and half dead. She said, "You know something, you abusive cunt? You destroyed me. You killed everything that I was. So please do this for me, won't you? And be sure to stream it live just like this, so I can see." It was her who kicked the chair. My Laura. A few weeks later, I sent her a message. She'd been able to send me one after all. Said that I hoped she was doing better than she was, to imply no hard feelings, to forestall her guilt if she ever freed herself from those things, just in case. Love always, Garry. Which sounds bats hit crazy, I suppose. Well, see, in the end, I didn't care about the video. Wherever and whatever she was, I knew those early days were real. Maybe we were mismatched, but they were real. She wasn't to blame for herself, not with those parasitic black marks on her legs. And there's no better way of letting go than to forgive. Forgiveness through which you start to regrow and find that withered flicker of strength you once knew. Only letting go in the heart, it still leaves the problem of the body, and the depression, and the weed that sends it south, the old habits that undid you. So when you meet someone new not long afterwards, someone perfect in ways never imagined, how much can really be said? For hope? Because I did meet someone just like that. Someone just like me, mostly at first only a little bit more, and a little bit less. Her perfection no less in her less than her more. The outside beauty just a bonus. But my body wasn't ready, I don't think. Not for someone as weird as I am. Maybe it is now that I'm strong again, but now I'm not even sure I know who she is either. Not after today. Not after another hint of that old immature sadistic. Maybe we shouldn't choose while we're still weak. Maybe we can get it wrong. That we need to wait till we're strong again. See, when we fall and our bodies fail our minds, that's when we learn a person. We learn what they choose to see. We learn their projections and their interpretations of things. And yet, I still don't know what I've learned. Maybe black marks, they aren't always born of trauma. I really don't know. But I don't think I care, not really. Not anymore. You take her idea with you all the same. You love her at her worst no less than her best. Love her for what's hidden, deep down, and inside. And what she hides can be worth it all. That which strength gives. And so you clean your space and do the work and strengthen yourself for yourself by yourself. You become the person that you are. Never for her, no matter the her. Not for anyone. Least of all, for someone like Laura. Laura, that girl I knew once, who wanted to be saved, who I thought I could fix, who only wanted love, who gave me love and her beautiful webbed feet, and nothing else, who never wanted to fix herself.